and welcome to Matchmove for Production by VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this video we'll be moving on to shot MM21. What we'll do first, we'll just play through the shot so we can see what we're going to track, then we'll open 3DEqualizer. So 3DEqualizer is opened. You should have a UI like this, and if you don't, you can go down to Environments and select Basic, and this will reset your UI to this workspace. So the first thing that we want to do is import our image sequence. So if you've purchased the data package from my Gumroad store, that's great because you can follow through with me every step, and you'll also have some great footage for your showreel or some projects. If you don't, you can still follow through with your own footage, but you may get stuck at some points if you don't have the same data as I do. So we'll go up to cameras at the top left in our object browser. If you select it and go over to our right where it says live action footage, we select browse and we can navigate to our image sequence. So we're going to do MM21 zoom animal, and we'll go down to plates, we'll select UHD and we'll pick animal zoom. And this is going to be a zoom shot, so it's going to be slightly different from our other ones. So we've imported our image sequence in. You can see it's dark because all this footage has been transcoded to a linear color space. So if we go over to our 8-bit color conversion and change our gamma to 2.2, this will bring it to a more usable color space. So we can't really play through our timeline yet because we need to export our buffer compression file. So if we go to 3DE and we'll save our project first, what I'll do, I'll just make a new directory. I'll call it G, and I'll just save it the shot name. Now click OK. Now I'll select playback and export my buffer compression file. So now that's exported, I'll import my buffer compression file. So now we can play for our timeline. So we press the spacebar. We can see what may look like a forward tracking shot. It's actually not, it's just a zoom shot. So we will have to do some other things differently for this one. So next thing we need to do is set up our lens. So if you go to your data package, you should have a little notepad with your lens data. So you can see we've got a Blackmagic 4K camera, we've got our sensor size, and we've also got what lens we've used, but we don't have a focal length. So what I do for every shot, I only use my film back height. So I'll go to my lens, and we've got our film back width and height here. So I'm just going to change my film back height to 11.88 and make sure you put millimeter, otherwise it will change it to centimeter, and it will do a passive adjustment to the width for the aspect ratio, and you can see it's coming correct. I'm going to leave my focal length as 30mm, and then I'm going to come down to my lens distortion and change it to classic LD because it's got some more basic distortion parameters, because we're going to be solving for our distortion as well. So now we've done that, we want to do our single frame lineup. So if you go to our point group, select our point group and go down to 3D models, if you right click, add new and import OBJ file. Now if you go to your data package, you see you've got all this stuff in here. So now if we go to set geo, we've got scan, and we've got a branches scan and an only branches scan. So this is the full scan of the area, so we're going to only bring in the only branches scan because it's quite heavy. So if you select OK, now press F5, you see we've got some geometry here, but we can't really see what's going on. So if we click center models, we can now see our geometries come in. If we hold shift and left click, we can rotate around and we can see we've got some geometry that resembles these branches. So if we go to our 3D model, so if we, and we can see it's grayed out because we need to select our 3D model first. Then we need to change it to as reference only. Then we can bring our alpha down so we can sort of see more detail on it. So I'm going to hold shift and right click and zoom in. So it could be quite tricky to find out where this is lined up. But you're sort of, if you hold left if you hold left shift and left click, you can rotate round, right click to zoom in, and you can sort of see this, it matching the sort of form of this branch. So I'm just going to pick an area first to line up. I'm going to pick this part here. So now I've got that lined up roughly. And just to zoom in, I'm going to select extract vertex, hold control and left click. Now it's made a line up point. So now if I hold shift and left click, I can now rotate everything from that position. I can sort of move things around to get a little bit of a better position. So now I'm going to pick some other parts. So I can see, so if I keep rotating around, I can see this is starting to line up here. So I'm going to do the same again. If I hold Alt and press left click, that will deselect it. So now if I press extract vertex, hold control, left click, make another line up point. And I'm just going to make these line up points throughout all these areas. So now this is starting to line up. So I'm going to select extract vertex, hold control and left click. And I'm just going to do that for all the other parts. You can sort of see it's not quite lining up very well because we don't know what the focal length is at the moment. It's probably wrong. So what we can do, if it's struggling, we can sort of select our slider. We can choose which way. So if we go to the right, we can see that it's not getting any better. So if we go left, we can sort of see this is starting to come into place. So if we keep going, we can get it roughly, and we'll leave it as 20 mil on here. Then we'll add some more line up points. So that's extract vertex, hold control and left click. We'll just pull that up. We can readjust some of the ones that we've already done. Pull this into here. Can't quite see it, but there's a branch poking in here. So if you turn 3D models off and on, you can sort of see it's now fitting. So what we can do, we can sort of still play with our focal length adjustment, see what sort of range we can work in. Just do slight adjustments. And this is just only a rough lineup. We'll do it with the more accurate one after we've got a rough lineup. And that's with all these lineups. We want to go. We may not get everything fitting, but we want to go for the majority fit because we don't know how well these scans are. Because most of this looks like it's fitting, but because of what's scanning, I'd expect that this is probably not done a great job at figuring out the actual thickness of this. So if we try and keep this sort of in the center and like keep a good average of the lineup. So we've got a pretty close lineup. So if we store our pose, and we can now see that we've got like a 19mm lens that's sort of fitting quite nicely. So if we go to our cameras up at the top, right click, add new reference camera, and this will create a reference camera under our sequence camera. So now if we double click on this, go over to our live action footage, select browse. Now if you go to your data package, you can go to your lens grid, select your sequence view so you can see all of them, and we'll select the 19mm EXR, click OK. So now if you press F3, And you can see it's quite dark, so we still need to do our 8-bit color conversion on this because it's been transcoded to a linear color space as well. So we'll change that to 2.2. So if we zoom in, you should see this red grid. So if you select the top left-hand corner and let it snap to these edge corners, and you want to do that to 3 of them, so you should have something like this. Now if you click snap, that snaps all the points to these corners. So now we need to extend this grid out through our entire lens grid. So if we hold Control, press up, hold Control, press down, that will extend it up and down. And the same with left and right. So hold Control on left, and hold Control on right. So now that's done, all we need to do is go up to calculate distortion and camera geometry. We'll change our distortion parameters to distortion and quartic, and we'll calculate lens parameters. So we'll set parameters. If you select out and distort, you can preview your distortion, and you can see it straightened out our lens grid. So now we're done with our distortion. If we go over to our sequence camera, so double click on that, so it should be highlighted in yellow. We can select undistort and we can preview our distortion on our image sequence now. So if you go back to F5, we can now continue with our sort of lining up, because now we have our undistorted plate. We should get a little bit better of a lineup. If we just look closely, we can see that we've got this edge working really well. All these bits are lining up. Pull that down a little bit. Just leave it. Let's put just this branch. That's going to be a little bit strange because the scan has probably not picked up the depth or the thickness of this branch that well. So now we kind of get into a point where we're not really getting anywhere. So if we just go to F2 and we can select points, we just want to make single frame points. So if we hold Control and left click, we're not tracking this, we're just making a single frame lineup. And just make quite a few over points on the geometry, on the plate that you know you can put onto the geometry. So hold Control left click, and we're not tracking these, we're just placing them around so we can lock in our single frame. You don't need many, so if we press F5, we can select all our points. Go edit, project points on 3D models. We've got 7 of 9, so we can zoom in a little bit. Select edit and project points again. And if you don't get all of them, it doesn't matter, so because we've got more than enough for a single frame. So if we press Alt-C and solve, it's now solved our camera position on this single frame. So if we click use result, we can now delete these lineup points. Now we can just look around for places that don't kind of line up as good as we want them to, and we can do more lineup points to pull it into place. So if we select extract vertex, hold Control and left click, we can sort of push this in. If we go to F2, I'm going to make another single frame here. I'm going to project that onto that point so I can lock that position in. It's not going to let me. There we are. We'll just do for same for any other parts that are kind of looking a bit off. So up here on the top left, pull that back in. Make another single frame, go back to F5. And project onto the models. Press Alt-C to solve. Use result. Now what we'll go to our lens. And we'll go to our focal length, and we'll change it from a fixed to adjust, because we've only done a rough sort of adjustment on here, so we want to do another fine tune. So if we go to if we select that to adjust, go to Windows, Parameter Adjustment window, you should have this window now. So now if we change this to adaptive, click adjust, this will now fine tune our lens. We can do that a couple times. If we press Alt-C, done a very small fine adjustment. we delete our lineup points, you can still see this is slightly off. So if we actually select that point, and we can change our static weight, and we can change that to 25, and we'll do another parameter adjustment. Let's see if that changes. And that sort of pulled it in, but it's pulled everything else off. So I'll actually put that back down to 1. Like I said, we should always go with the majority of the lineup. So if we actually survey free these, now we've done that. Survey free them. We just make and store your pose before doing this. We select extract vertex, hold control left click. I'm just going to try and pull things in a little bit tighter with some more lineup points. So it might go funny, so that's why you store your pose, now you can recall it. You might get some funny things happen like that. Just delete that point and do it again. Extract vertex. And we'll just extract vertices on the points on areas that we know are lined up quite well. So now we can sort of adjust this area. You see how we've got sort of an equal amount of offset around this, because this is probably not the right thickness. Cool. And I think we've got a pretty good lineup now. It's looking pretty tight. I'm not too worried about this because it looks like the scan's not so great down there. But we want to worry about this part here, where our see our creature's going to be walking along. So now if we select all our points, select edit, project points on 3D models. We've got 8 out of 11, so that should be fine. So if we press Alt C, and we can delete our lineup points now. And now we've locked that into position. So now what we can do, we can select, if we right click on our point browser, click add new point set, and we can call this SF, a single frame. Click OK. We can select all our points and drag them under our single frame. Now we can select view, hide selected points, and you need to make sure that you disable them. So go to modify, calculate, disable. So now that that single frame's been locked in with these tracking points, and they're disabled. So we can store pose again and go to F2, and now we can start tracking points. So we want to be picking points that we see throughout the entire shot. So I'm going to start off with something here. Gauge marker, track. You need to make sure you're on centered 2D so you can see your actual tracking point. So if you're on don't center, it will just, you can't really check if it's working or not. So I'm just going to select places. It's going to give me quite a nice wide spread. So gauge marker and track. So that's control left click to make a tracking marker. Gauge marker, track. So yeah, tracked backwards there. I always track from the first frame or track from the last frame because it's just easier that way. I'll pick points that are quite obvious. so I'll just do one more. So let's select all our points and see what we have. So you've got quite a good spread. I might do one more up here. Don't have anything as of yet. So gauge marking track. We'll just check all our points. And we can track some stuff in the background as well if we need to. Help. Some stuff on the ground. Cool. So we're pretty much done with all the tracking points now. So if we go back to F5, we go to our lineup point where we stored our pose. It should be a red keyframe. So what we can do, we can actually just select all our points, even the ones that we've tracked in the background, and we can go edit project points on 3D models, because they're not going to project onto anything because there's no 3D model there. So now it looks like all of them apart from this one has projected on, so if we edit project points again, and they all look like they've projected on now. So if we press Alt-C to solve, if we press spacebar, we can see now we're getting the problems that you get with solving a zoom camera. You've got this really big long curve here, and you see everything slipping off, and you see it's not changing the focal length. So what we can do, if we go over to our camera, so actually before we do that, we'll just do a quick focal length adjustment on the first frame. So if you go to your parameter adjustment window, clear that and adjust. I'll press Alt-C. Sort of made it go a bit funny. So we'll do that again. So we're actually going to go back, because that seems to have broken. We'll go back to 19, press Alt-C, and you should have something like this. So we'll leave it on 19. If we go to our camera, we need to now solve for our focal zoom. So if we scroll down, you should get this lens section here, and you have focal length and focal distance. So now if we select use from lens, but if we select dynamic zooming, it will go a bit crazy because it resets back to 30mm. Don't worry for now. So what we'll do is we'll go to Windows, Curve Editor. So now we'll go to our Curve Editor, and you should have a window like this. If you just expand it, we want to go to our camera lens curves and select focal length zoom. You see it automatically stays at 30. So if we get this key here, we can just drag it down, and we can help it out by dragging this key down to 19mm. It doesn't have to be exactly it, just, yeah, that's pretty close. Just pull that back. So now you can see it's lined back up. So now we've got our dynamic zooming settings set at the 19mm or closest. We have to calc zoom curve in classic frame by frame fine tuning. Now if we click use result, it's created this curve for us now, and that's going to be our animation zoom. So if we just close that down and press Alt-C, we can see that it's kind of still curved up, but if we play through our timeline, we can see that it's working much better now. So what we can do, we can just do that. We'll do that one more time, see if it improves it. Classic frame by frame. Use result. Okay, so we've got a pretty good solve now, but we've still got this massive curve. So if we go to deviation browser and show point deviation curves, select active points only, and just select which ones are going a bit funny. So our problem's not with our points. The problem's with when you zoom on a lens, not only do you change the focal length, you're also changing the distortion on it as well. So we actually also need to solve for an animated distortion for this shot to fix this curve and fix this slipping around the edge. So we can do that by going to F3, and if we bring back our curve editor, just bring this up here, and we can select Animate Distortion. Bring back our curve as well. So what we want to do, we want to go to, if we close our camera lens curves, we actually want to go to our lens distortion curves and select distortion. If you click view all, you can see it's just a flat curve, and this is what we need to fix. We need to make this curve work with our distortion curve work with our focal length curve. So if we look on our deviation browser, we can see it's slowly curving up. So if we start on the first keyframe and we can keel, and that's made a key there. So I'm just going to put this across here because it keeps going behind. Then once we've made that key, we'll just move, let's say we've got 80 frames, so I'm just going to do it every 10 frames. And I'll keel. Keel again. Just place keys on every single one of these, every 10. Cool. Now we're pretty much done with this window. We can close it. And so we come back to our curve editor. We see now we've got keys every 10 frames on every single one of these values. We're not going to be using anamorphic, curvature, X and Y. We're just going to be using our distortion and quartic. So if you select your distortion and your quartic and select view all, you can see they're both very flat curves. So if we hold Alt, left click all of our vertices, we now want to go to Python, adjustment, and adjust curve vertices. And this will give us some parameters we can adjust for our distortion to work with our focal length. So what I'll do, I'll just actually change this. I'm going to give it quite a wide area to look for. So I'm going to change this to 1 on each of them. So the first one should be -1 to 1. This is going to give it a really big area to look at. So it might take a long time to solve, but we'll just click OK. And if we go back to our parameter adjustment window, so we should now have loads of these script distortion elements in here now. So we need to make sure you turn off your focal length one. We only want the yellow ones to be on. So we can actually remove that one. So we only want our yellow ones to be solving. So now if we select adaptive all, and we can select adjust, this will start adjusting all these keyframes to fit the distortion for this curve. So this might take a long time, so I'll just fast forward through this. So now that's done, we can select transfer parameters. And now what we can see, if we go to our lens distortion curves, we can see that it's now adjusted all our curves for a distortion. And it may look jaggedy, but don't worry about that for now. So if we now minimize this, if we press Alt-C to solve our camera, we can now see that this is completely flattened out now. We've got a really low deviation. So now if we press play, we go to F5 and press play, we can see that we have no slippage at all and everything's working pretty much perfectly. So we can go back to our curve editor, select our distortion. So it might be a bit jaggedy, so what we can do, select them all, smooth our tangents. We'll do the same for the quartic distortion. This might be okay, but we'll just see what it's doing. So Alt-C. That's not really done much, but so we get to F3, we can actually see, you can just see up in the top corner that our distortion is now adjusting. You can just about see it here. It's such a small amount, but that small amount makes such a huge difference to making your solve actually working when you're doing zoom lenses. So we've got that pretty close. So what we'll do now, we'll go back to our curves. And it kind of, these wiggly lines, let's try and sort of make this a bit more logical, because when we're going through, it kind of looks like it's wobbling. So if we think about it, as we're zooming out, this curve is kind of a little bit odd. So like we would have to be zooming out, then changing. It might be because of the speeds. What we can do, we can just sort of adjust these curves. We drag them up, and we'll sort of make them look a bit more natural. We'll remove this wobbliness. This may break it, but it's worth trying. Because at the moment, it doesn't look like a normal sort of curve. So if we can actually, it's quite wobbly. Let's actually edit, delete that CV. We'll delete every other one. It's a little bit easier to sort of make a smoother curve with less points. So now we can see it's sort of wobbling here, so let's smooth out this curve. So now we've got a much nicer sort of curve. And we'll do the same for our quartic. We'll just delete every other frame. So we'll just do the same, we'll smooth this curve out. So this may break it, but let's try and make things a bit more logical, because it doesn't quite look too correct, it being all wobbly. So we'll leave it something like that. We'll minimize that, press Alt-C and solve again. If we press play through, we can still see that we've got this big hump, and we've actually made it worse. So we'll actually go back to our curve editor and our parameter adjustment, and we'll remove all, and we'll just do them one at a time. So if we make sure that we've deselected all our points, so go to our quartic, hold Alt and left click, and select all our distortion points. Then we'll go to adjustment again, and we'll adjust curve vertices. And we'll do this from 1 to 1 again. And we'll go to our parameter adjustment window, select adaptive all, select adjust. Press Alt C and solve. So now that's flattened it out. We don't have any of these big lumps in it now. So if we go to our curve, we can sort of see it's pretty much the same, it's just probably adjusted it a little bit better. So now if we deselect these curves, select our quartic distortion, we'll remove all our parameters first, then we'll go to adjustment and adjust curve vertices. We'll change this to -1 to 1. Click OK. We'll clear that. Make sure everything's on adaptive, then we'll go adjust. Transfer parameters and Alt C. So it's slightly changed it now. Now we don't have these really big lumps. We've got some sort of wobbling in here, but that could possibly be because we're survey like in the wrong depth. So we could try and change this to modify survey and approximately surveyed and see what that does. And it hasn't really changed it. So we can just press play and we can look at our shot. So now we've got our camera working with our zoom. Everything's looking really good. We've got no slipping. We've animated our distortion to fit with the plate. So our next step would be to export our camera. So if we go 3DE4, export project, Maya. We'll change our start frame to 1001. Make sure we got export no 3D models. Then export our file. And we'll export it to our directory. I'll just call it the same name as the shot so I know it always corresponds to this plate. Select OK, and OK. So now we need to export our distortion node. So if we go File, Export, 3DLD4 distortion node. We'll go File name. We'll save it to the same place. Nuke LD node. Select OK. Then now we need to export out our undistorted plate. So if we go to 3D and run warp 4, this will now open this window. So now if we scroll down to save footage, browse, and we'll go to our folder that we made. We'll make a new directory, we'll call it UDP. Call it animal zoom. We'll call it UDP dot 4 hashes dot EXR to signify its image sequence. We'll click OK. We'll just open up our lens distortion values. And we'll just check that widget. It should automatically check for the focus distance on it, so it's bringing in the animated distortion for your undistorted plate. It's good if you just open this up and just check for your frames, and you can see that the animated distortion is working. And it looks like it is, so it's fine, and your focal length's working as well. So we can close that. We'll change our scale to 50%, so we can have a half res plate in Maya. Then we'll just select render. Then you should start getting green keyframes to signify that you're rendering. This might take a while, so I'll fast forward through this. Cool, so that's done now. So if we go to File, Exit, we're now done in 3DEqualizer. Our next step would be to take this into Maya and set up our camera to be used. So if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.